lifting stay-at-home orders today, weeks after the White House shelved some of the recommendations for being too restrictive. Dr. Amesh Adalja, senior scholar at the Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security, joins me now. And Dr. Adalja, let's focus on the guidelines for reopening schools first. It says that daycares and schools should try to meet more than a dozen recommendations before they can open. One of those recommendations is to screen kids and employees daily. It says employees would need to wear masks, but didn't specify if students would have to. What's your assessment here?
I do think that as schools open, they have to have a procedure in place where they can identify individuals that may be harboring the virus and exclude them from school until they're better. And I think that that's what we're seeing everywhere we see openings. So, for example, when I go to the hospital, they ask me questions. Have I been exposed to somebody without personal protective equipment? Do I have a fever, a cough, muscle aches, or pains? That's what they're going to need to do to make schools a safer place. And I think it's something that's doable, and more businesses are going to have to do this in addition to schools, just as we go forward in this era of the pandemic.
The guidance for workplaces is similar. It also mentions more cleaning, disinfection, and ventilation. Could you remind our viewers why that ventilation part is so important?
Well, you want to make sure that the virus is not spreading through the ventilation, and that doesn't really happen that often. It's usually a very controlled setting when that does happen. So you want to make sure that there is adequate ventilation, that you've got plans in place to understand how your air conditioners work, how your heaters work in terms of what it might do to airflow and the virus. And I think it's just part of a whole plan that you have to have of operating in an era when there is an infectious disease spreading. And this isn't something that I don't think is going to be insurmountable for many schools, but it's important that they start planning now when they have the time.
At a hearing today, Dr. Rick Bright, an ousted vaccine official, said that even if a vaccine is ready in 12 to 18 months, which he called aggressive, that it might not be available for everyone right away. Listen to this.
If you can imagine this scenario this fall or winter, maybe even early next spring when vaccine becomes available, there's no one company that can produce enough for our country or for the world. It's going to be limited supplies. We need to have a strategy and plan in place now to make sure that we can not only fill that vaccine, make it, distribute it, but administer it in a fair and equitable plan.
Is there anything the government can do now to make sure that we are ready to manufacture a vaccine on a large scale?
This is probably the biggest problem we face with the vaccine, being able to make enough vaccine to vaccinate the country or even the world. And what you're seeing now is a program called Operation Warp Speed, where the government is starting to plan to actually manufacture the vaccine before we actually have the efficacy trial data, meaning start making it before we know whether it works. That's one way that we can shorten things, and it's a gamble and it's daunting, but I do think that it's in the realm of possibility, but we got the fact that vaccines are not something that are made in months. These are some things that are made in years, and we have to be prepared to face this virus without a vaccine for maybe up to 2 years or so. And we hope for the best, but it's often a very big challenge to get a vaccine ready to a novel virus for which we have no human precedent.
I have to imagine that there's going to be quite a demand for the flu shot this fall. Are there concerns that perhaps there won't be enough of the flu shot to go around, or that all of that production could then have an effect on production and distribution of a vaccine?
We want to make sure that we do get people vaccinated for flu, especially as we're dealing with successive waves of this virus, because they are going to be competing for the same resources. Both flu and coronavirus are going to cause people to be hospitalized. They're both requiring personal protective equipment. They both require ICU beds and mechanical ventilators. So we want to keep as many people out of the hospital as possible from influenza by having them vaccinated, so we have room to take care of the coronavirus patients. We do have a pretty robust flu vaccine manufacturing capacity. It's very rare when we have shortages. Sometimes we do have shortages, but I do think it is something that we have to think about, because we do expect to have a higher demand for flu vaccines this season. But it's probably going to be different plants that will make the coronavirus vaccine than the flu vaccine.
The World Health Organization is predicting that this pandemic could be with us in some form for 5 years. What does our world look like over the next few years if we are still living with the coronavirus?
2025?
What we will see is more death tolls from respiratory viruses than we've seen in past decades because the coronavirus will still be out there spreading, infecting people and killing some. We will see a lot of people voluntarily social distancing as the world kind of moves to a paradigm where you're dealing with the coronavirus as an everyday threat. So there will be some individuals, especially those in vulnerable populations, that will continue to social distance and continue to really try and limit their social interaction. We'll see people doing more telecommuting, maybe less traveling by airplane. More things are going to be done online. So I do think people will adjust to this, and it will change the way we approach life when we live in the midst of a coronavirus pandemic.
All right, Dr. Adalja, great to have you with us again. Thank you so much for being back on.
Thanks, Dad.
Thanks for having me.
Senator Richard Burr is temporarily stepping down as